Welcome to part 9, where we will now deal with the integrated analysis of the Belgian Health Interview Survey. And you may guess what it's about. We have seen, through this course, actually almost ever since the beginning, several techniques in isolation. For example, we saw stratification next to simple random sampling. We looked at multi-state sampling with the induced clustering in most cases. And more recently, we looked at weighting. Of course, not only did we mention that before, we even looked at what happens if we consider all those design aspects separately. We sneakingly looked at it in previous chapters and parts. So is it still necessary to devote an entire part to it? Well, maybe yes, there are a few additional things we can do. So far, we have looked at the estimation of a total, for example, an average, and in the Belgian Health Interview Survey, it mostly was an average. We're not estimating the total body mass index, we're estimating the average body mass index of the population. We looked at a proportion, stable GP, for example, but there are a few more things we can do. What if you want to explain stable GP in terms of gender, age, other socioeconomic variables, other health-related variables, etc.? In other words, you're interested in regression relationships. That's something we can do. Yeah, but we know regression. That's true, but we also knew a mean prior to coming to this course. But the question is, how do you estimate a regression relationship when on top of your interest in the regression relationship, you have to deal with a design that was of a survey type and that involves several design mechanisms? The other thing we may want to consider is something as basic as, for example, a contingency table, a frequency table. Did we do that? Contingency table. But of course, what if I cross-classify, for example, having a stable GP versus region, versus gender, versus socioeconomic status, etc.? Well, we can also do that by faithfully taking the design into account. Okay, so let's look at it in broad terms from a bird's eye perspective in chapter 22 and then, chapter 21, and then we will move on to a few further aspects. Okay, now, the other aspect where I would like to begin is the design, because what do we do if we want to select a sample from a sample frame, for example, and then what if we want to analyze such a properly collected sample? Way back when we were dealing with a first perspective on software, we looked at what we can do in terms of analysis. There are three main taxonomy dimensions. Do we use a model, yes or no? And so far we haven't really. We have really focused on, as I said a moment ago, estimating a total, a mean, or a proportion. But we can also build a model and take that model further to regression or logistic regression. In terms of data structure, we assumed it to be simple or complex, and complex means something like a hierarchy with random effects, etc. And then there is the survey design not taken into account, or somehow taken into account. So for example, if you take a model into account, you can do linear regression or ANOVA. Without a design, we have regression and ANOVA and generalized linear model procedures. But if you do take the design into account, you end up with survey means without a model and survey reg with a model. And then we know there is something like the mixed procedure in SAS, for example, which is the linear mixed model. And for a binary outcome, likewise. But then for a simple proportion or a contingency table, we have frequency procedures. Well, likewise, is there a survey frequency procedure if we do take the design into account? Logistic regression, which can be done with various procedures, that's not so important, becomes survey logistic, etc. And then we have GenMod, our GEE tool, and our GLMM tools, GlimMix and NLMixed. All right, so we will do several of those. Mean estimation, been there, done that. Frequency tables we want to pay a little bit of attention to. And then there is linear regression and logistic regression. Okay, good. So that brings me to the end of chapter 21, which is nothing but a preview of what's going to happen. And in the next chapter, we will actually then do it. We will look into the estimation of means, proportions, and frequencies.